This evening we're in the book of Daniel, chapter 1. Daniel, chapter 1. We noticed last week that Jeremiah prophesied that Babylon would come and destroy the temple and take them captive, which he did. He besieged the city, surrounded the city, and eventually basically just starved them out and went in. Jeremiah was telling them to go out to them. Surrender yourself to them. It won't be as bad on you. But they would not listen. And so they took them, and the selection process would begin of selecting the brightest, the best and the brightest, and those who had no blemish, those who showed signs of intelligence, and so they would separate these people, and then they would be given in charge of the king's eunuch. They would receive the king's meat. In verse number 5, the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, and nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. So this was a process to prepare them, train them, prepare them, see that they looked their very best when they would stand before the king. But one thing that Babylon could not take from them, and that was who they were. And in verse number 8, after we are told their names, verse number 8, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested that the prince of the eunuchs, that he might not defile himself. He purposed in his heart. The dietary restrictions of the Hebrew people, what they were allowed to eat and drink, was very strict, but of course we know it was for their health, wasn't it? Numbers chapter, keep your finger here because we'll be coming back, but Numbers chapter 11, Numbers chapter 11, as the children of Israel are starting to complain about the bread that they have to eat. Does anyone else like bread with your meals? We like bread too well. But that manna they would gather like some type of white plant of some kind, and they would use that to make bread. And of course the Lord provided them manna, didn't he? And they would gather, and they would have enough. They were together on the 6th day. They were together twice as much. Notice verse 4. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic, but now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes. They're tired of the same thing all the time. I used to say that I would never get to a place where I would eat the same thing every single time. And guess what? That's exactly what I do. But they were complaining. But I wanted you to see the vegetables, the fish and the vegetables that they ate in Egypt. Now this was provided for them, and even today in Israel, their diet is more vegetarian than it is in meat, having meat. Some of the hotels that serve the foreigners, you will find some animal, some meat, some beef, and on certain days, but generally they have a vegetarian diet. I told you about the falafel. Brother Johnston, did you like the falafel? It was vegetables that they would put into a ball and deep fry, and then they put that into like a pita with other vegetables, and then they would put hummus over it. There was no mayonnaise, there was no mustard, but they would put that hummus over it, and really it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. Then the shawarmas had chicken strips, long, thin chicken strips, and again the pita, the vegetables, and the hummus. So vegetables, okay? In Ezekiel chapter 18, book of Ezekiel, chapter 18, let's see. What is that, Anita? What is that bread? That Ezekiel bread? And they use a scripture reference on the front of their package. Do you remember? Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was Ezekiel 18, but there is a scripture reference of the grains that they would eat. Four. Ezekiel chapter 4. Yeah, there it is. Chapter 4 and verse 9. Take thou also unto thee wheat and barley, beans and lentils and millet and fleeces, and put them in one vessel, and make thee bread thereof according to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon thy side. 390 days thou eat thereof. But I want you to notice the kind of grains. Miss Anita back there has a recipe for lentil soup. And she doesn't make too much of it because the rest of us don't care for it. Yes, sir?
I taught matters and customs of South Haven. I always, once a year, take lentil soup.
Yep.
And they just chopped down on that stuff. I took that in bread.
What kind of soup? Lentil? Did you get the red lentils?
Yeah. And I had them eat it without utensils. They had to eat it with the bread.
Yeah.
With the fingers. But I wanted them to understand how they ate it.
Right. Right. But of course you understand that they were trash cans. So it doesn't matter what you took to them to eat, they'd eat it.
Yeah, they did.
But of course now he is referring on Jacob and Esau, that Jacob fixed a pot of lentils, stirring that pot of lentils, when Esau came in and said, give me some soup.
Made it with lamb.
It had lamb in it. And Jacob said, well, give me your birthright and you can have a bowl of soup. So that's, you can find the red lentils, and then, of course, I don't know, the lamb is pretty expensive, but that's what happened there. But you can see the grains. Wheat, of course, was more for the people who could afford it. The poor had barley. They would have barley loaves. They would feed the animals barley. Okay? And some of these things, they, depending on their level, would be available to them. Okay? But it gives us an idea of the kind of diet that Daniel and the Hebrew children had while they were now here in Daniel chapter 1. And the king's table, of course, they had every kind of animal and every kind of thing, and Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat. Defilement. Best way to describe defilement is putting something bad into something good. Okay? Changing the look of it. And of course, Daniel's devotion to God required that he only eat clean meat, and that he would not eat or drink the king's wine. Okay? Because we notice further down that he opted for pulse and water for his drink. So let's continue reading a little bit. This is Daniel chapter 1, and I continue with verse 9. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed our meat, and who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall he make me endanger my head to the king. No doubt that there were other slaves that were working hard, that were not fed as well, that were not treated as well. And the eunuch said, if you look like some of them, I could get in trouble. Okay? The king has plans for you. There's an old saying, bloom where you're planted. Did not Jesus, as he was growing up, was in favor with God and men? Daniel, he could have been a problem. Instead, he bloomed where he was planted. The little maid for Naaman, watching him die of leprosy, could she not have said, well, he deserves what he gets? Instead, she said, if my Lord was in Israel, where the prophet of God is, he could recover his leprosy. Bloom where you're planted. They can change our geography. They can take from us physical things, but they cannot take our hearts from us. They cannot take our devotion to God from us. Because that is in our hearts, that's in our head, and our bodies will show that devotion. I'm going to take you back to the book of Ezekiel again. Back to the book of Ezekiel. someone got into pretty serious trouble because he decided his heart. Well, his heart got messed up, wasn't it? This is Ezekiel chapter 28. Ezekiel chapter number 28. I'm going down to verse number 17. I thought of another verse in here. I'm trying to look real fast for it, but I'm not doing very well. Ezekiel 28. I think we all agree this describes Lucifer, doesn't it? I've made a note to the side here about Luke chapter 10 and verse number 18. I saw Lucifer fall as lightning from the sky. That's what that reference is. Where, at verse 15, it says, "Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, until iniquity was found in thee." He's a created being, isn't he? The angels are created beings. Verse 16, "By the multitude of thy merchandise they are filled in the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore will I cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee." That's where it started, wasn't it? His heart got messed up. Okay? His heart got messed up. What is the greatest commandment of the law? Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. Matthew chapter 22. We just looked at, not long ago, this guy named Simeon, didn't we? Your heart is messed up. That's what Peter told him, wasn't it? Your heart was messed up. Somebody wrote, "Where a man's treasure is, there will his heart be also." That's true, isn't it? I know I've told you several times, just bear with me. My uncle ran a gas station for 4 years. He said if he had to do it again, he'd run a pizza shop. People will spend all kinds of money on pizzas and chips and pop, but if you tell them gas has gone up 3 cents, it's like the world is suddenly crashing around them. Then a family had to buy a couple of tires on their way to Kings Island, and they were really upset, and they said because having to spend that extra money, and he heard stuff like that all the time. It's where your heart is, isn't it? Okay? It's where your heart is. Well, listen, my beloved, we need to give our heart to the Lord, do we not? But Daniel purposed. He said, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to follow. Yes, those who were selected to be with Daniel and the 3 other brethren for training and grooming and set up to be, Nebuchadnezzar had a pyramid type style of government. He was at the top, he had people under him, and it just kind of filtered down from there. And they would be put in position of power and authority. But Daniel, who was willing to do as he was told, was not willing to give up the fact that he was a Hebrew and his dietary requirements. And that eunuch said, now listen, if you start looking bad, I could lose my head. I could lose my head. Okay? All right, let's read on a little bit further. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat. Now this word pulse simply means finely chopped vegetables. Pulse to eat and water to drink. Now that don't sound quite right, does it? Whenever the king puts out a spread of great food, you know, and we have one of our fellowships, the table is full of food, we're all not standing there going, well, I can eat that, but I can't have that. And, I can have a couple of that, but I can't eat that over there. We pretty well just dive in, don't we? We just get fill our plates up and beg the Lord forgiveness and just suffer the heartburn later if we have to. But these men said, just give us these vegetables, finely chopped vegetables, and water to eat. I had someone come to church one time, long time ago, and he said that he was on the Genesis diet, which basically is a vegetarian diet. As Brother Morphew was reminding us that during the millennium, we'll all be vegetarian. Right? We'll all be vegetarian. And this one guy spoke up and said, I have to give up my shrimp? Oh my goodness. But 10 days on this diet. Verse 13, then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. You line us up and see who is better and who is worse. Thus Melzar took away a portion of their meat and wine that they should drink, and give them pulse. He followed their request. He didn't have to do that, but he followed their request. And at the end of the days that the king had said he would bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them. And among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. There was an obvious difference between those of the children of Israel who went on this special diet and those who ate of the king's meat. Well, of course, you know what that meant, don't you? That meant everybody will eat this. Everybody will have the vegetarian diet. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and the astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the first king of Cyrus. The king's counselors, there would be magicians, there would be astrologers, there would be men of science, there would be men of art, there would be educated folk, is the best way to put this. And whenever something come up, they would advise the king on a course of action. And Daniel would live in Babylon the rest of his life, wouldn't he? So they're taken somewhere around 506 BC, they are taken to Babylon. There, they are separated, they are evaluated, and then they are to be assimilated. I thought that was pretty good. And they were to be groomed for special places of service, that they would be placed in order to serve Nebuchadnezzar and to serve Babylon. Like I said, they can take away everything that we have, but they cannot take away our hearts. They cannot take away our souls. They cannot take away our love for the Lord if we just keep Him where He belongs, and that's in our hearts, right? So now it is obvious that these boys, these young men, are going to be put in places of service. And they would serve well. Joseph, was he not sold into slavery? Taken to Egypt? And it wasn't long till Potiphar realized that he was an intelligent young man and could serve him well, which Joseph did. Remember that phrase, bloom where you're planted? Which Joseph did. And Joseph was elevated in position to be Potiphar's man of accounts, to be his steward, as Potiphar was steward to Pharaoh. So God places people in the right position at the right time for the right purpose. That's going to happen here. Joseph would be accused of impropriety and put in prison for 20 years. And then what would happen? Pharaoh started having dreams of good years and bad years, and the cupbearer finally broke down to tell Pharaoh, there's a guy in prison that told me what would happen. And I witnessed what happened to the other guy that was with me, just as Joseph said. So Pharaoh orders Joseph brought before him. And sure enough, Joseph is elevated to the second most powerful man in the world. God had him where He wanted him for the purpose He wanted him. Nebuchadnezzar is going to have a vision of an image, a huge image. Okay? This building is 90 feet long. No, excuse me, it's 60 feet long, isn't it? And 30 feet wide. So this image that Nebuchadnezzar is going to see is 90 feet tall, around 8 to 10 feet wide, that he's going to set up and require people to worship. But God has Daniel in the right place at the right time. Isn't that amazing? How God is able to put us where He wants us, when He wants us, how He wants us. And then those boys will shine. At least till chapter 3. And they get in trouble again because they will not bow to that image. So, give us what we can eat. See who is better. And of course, they were better. And so it was ordered for everybody. But we will continue in chapter 2 next Sunday night, the Lord willing, as we look at Nebuchadnezzar's dream. What a frightening dream he would have. But that dream, that image, not only in chapter 2 and 3, but also chapter 7. There's a whole other set of beasts alongside And God even, there's one of them is a bear with 3 bones in its mouth. And God even explains what those bones are. Okay? And Daniel is seeing all of this and has a run-in once in a while with some people, but you know, Daniel stayed faithful to God. That's kind of going to be our theme as we go through Daniel. Okay.